Greek culture and history is so influential on the Western world and other places, not just the Western world, we often don't realize something we've known our entire lives originated with them or was continued by them after inheriting it from some older culture. Greek influence is so ubiquitous that sometimes we discover that something we've known all our life had Greek origins, but we didn't know that part. We didn't know it was Greek to begin with, but we've known it all our life. Like inventions, philosophy, people, myths. Some of those we do know, but we lack context, right? Most of us know a decent bit about their mythology. All of you have heard of Zeus and Athena and Aphrodite, but about how they were worshipped and how the Greeks viewed them, it's different than how we view them, for sure. It's very different. You've also heard, surely, about Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We learned that in like 7th grade or something here in the US, but you've mostly heard about their ideas. You've mostly heard about their philosophy and their writings, not them, and not the context in which they lived, and how their ideas impacted people when they were new, when those ideas were fresh. And they did. They lived in the era of this episode. Well, Socrates didn't. He died in 399, and we're about to hit 382 here. So we're past him, but the other two are in this episode. One of the less pleasant examples that we were reminded of from ancient Greece is the constant back and forth between democracy and oligarchy, which, hey, that's still playing out now. Hasn't stopped, really. 2,400 years later, go back even farther. Yeah, we're still playing that game of Thrones. In this era, as we've said, it was not always, but often, very bloody. And it's not all one-sided, even if you prefer democracy, as I do, and most of you probably do, over rule by rich folk. The downsides of both are on display here. This isn't going to be an all democracy is just always a shining example here. To be fair, modern democracy is very different from the democracies of classical and ancient Greece. They were a new idea. Oligarchies weren't as new. So, of the two, oligarchy is older by quite a bit. But and this is often why Democrats are considered liberal and oligarchs conservatives. Government aside, one is just older than the other. With religion, it's much the same. We don't worship the Olympian gods now, but they're still around. We still talk about them. They're still appearing here and there. But really, as a species, we have had endless conservative versus liberal debates in a variety of theaters and topics and chronologies, fights, wars, and things like that rooted in religion. And this is true even if we limit ourselves to one religion, as in intra-religious disputes, meaning Christians fighting other Christians or Islam people fighting each other as well. Any of those examples, we're not talking necessarily about two different religions clashing, because the Greek world largely worshiped the same gods, but not in the same way. One of the most fascinating things about ancient Greece, and it reminds me of the Westerosi period of 100 kingdoms, when there were only first men, no Andals yet, is how there were so many cities and towns in Greece where each one of them had the same gods, more or less, but they had different relationships with them. Each city-state or city or even town or village had a unique relationship with each one of the Olympian gods. All sorts of variety. Sometimes it's pretty similar, but sometimes it's not. So that really reminds me of the 100 Kingdoms period, because you just have a lot of dynasties and kingdoms coming and going, but slowly moving towards larger states. and all united under pretty much the same religious umbrella, yet still able to fight over being over that, even though it's the same religious umbrella. Since George does such an amazing job at capturing how real humans would behave in a fantasy setting, the carryover here is immense. It justifies and supports a lot of our beliefs about how thorough and realistic George is, even in an unrealistic setting. Some of what ancient Greece looks like to us is an unrealistic setting, because you talk about, they have oracles, they have things that don't seem like they could have happened, but they believed it, so they act on it as if it's true. And that makes it real in a sense. And the origin of these concepts, like we talk about the origin of certain beliefs and ways of thinking or ways of acting, cultural touchstones, their origins, these kind of things, tropes sometimes, they're tropes within stories. These have been appearing in stories ever since we've had stories, which is farther back than anyone knows. And that's what George is best at. He is a great world builder, but he's an even better storyteller. Of course, those things go together. But because he's so good at both, it fits, and we see how well this translates. The tale of three city-states here continues as Sparta maintains their seizure of Thebes, while Athens looks to reclaim their maritime dominance. Persia has war on many fronts and ever-worsening palace intrigue, making their interference in Greece, or lack thereof, uncertain. While the old kings, Agesilaus and Artaxerxes, live on, a new generation of leaders, warriors, orators, and innovators are emerging throughout Greece. The continuing stories of Chabrias, Parysatis, Iphicrates, and Tirabazus are added to by the stories of Pelopidas and Epaminondas, and many others, featuring a Song of Ice and Fire counterparts and new characters on top of that. This is part 2 of a multi-part series made up of Fire and Blood and Aziz in Greece. Characters and parallels to A Song of Ice and Fire set within a great standalone and largely true story that impacted how we live today. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of History and Westeros, our sub-series that we're growing as time goes on, more drawing into real-world parallels and origins and things like that have comfortable comparisons within A Song of Ice and Fire, simple and sometimes a little subtle, but never too obscure. This is also an extension of our 2025 Topics Moot, where this topic was chosen. It's another one that's grown beyond the telling, but more so than usual. But that's real-life history for you. There's a lot to it, huh? If you have questions for us, hit us up at westeroshistory@gmail.com, or if you're watching this live here on YouTube, well, hit us with questions here during the live chat. Now, in 2025... I'm still catching new parallels entirely within the framework of A Song of Ice and Fire. That leads me to conclude that even though I've found a lot of parallels here between Greeks and A Song of Ice and Fire, Greeks and George's characters, there's surely some that I'm missing. So I encourage you to speak up if you catch any. Let us know whether you think it's a small one, whether you think, surely they've thought of that one. You might be wrong. Maybe we haven't. So I'd love to hear from you all on that and any other subject related to this. It's always good to get feedback from y'all. Let's start with the trivia question. Who is said to be responsible for creating the Sacred Band of Thebes? The Sacred Band is going to be introduced this episode. I mentioned them briefly last time. They are the 300 men that are 150 pairs of lovers in one unit. And that's quite interesting. We'll talk about it a lot this episode and going forward. As I said, this absolutely functions as a standalone, this episode. Each of these episodes does, but I think it's the most fun to start at the beginning, and I don't know how many parts it's going to take. At first I thought one, which was kind of silly. Now I think I don't know. I think I don't know how many it's going to take. We're going to go another 100 years roughly, not all in this episode, so we'll take as long as it takes. We'll space them out maybe once a month or so, and it'll be fun for most of y'all. And we'll continue to follow this path, and maybe we'll look forward to other places and other times that we can do this with as well. And of course, we're mostly focused on the characters, as always. That's always going to be where I start and finish and focus on. That's the most fun thing, the people, right? That's what George has really emphasized for us within A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm carrying that over here to real life history. Now, the fog of history ensures that we'll never truly know what happened, but that's something George captures as well. There's lots of things within the story we're never going to get answers for. Most of those are things within the world building and not within the story, but within the story too. We're never going to know what certain characters were thinking or what really happened with certain supernatural events and even mundane ones. And that's reality. So let's get a quick run through of the sections, give you an idea of what topics we're covering today, and then we'll get right to it. We have the Spartan occupation continues. We have fire and blood and smoke. We have the sacred band of Thebes. We have the owl awakens. Yes, that is referring to Athens, the Athenian owl being their main symbol. The Boeotian War. And that unpunctuated throughout, we're going year to year. So whenever we change years, I'll point that out as well. And of course, we'll continue to have our Olympic victors and other important cultural moments outside of war. Because I don't want to only talk about the wars. That is certainly the main driver of events here, but it's not everything. Spartan occupation. This is roughly the year 382. We're going to be dealing with a few things that are elsewhere outside of Greece, where the chronology isn't always certain, but it's very close to this time. Agesilaus once said, "By sowing frugality, we reap liberty, a golden harvest." Yeah, I get what he's saying, but he didn't exactly live by that. He certainly got into the whole money aspect of being a power player that Sparta had tried to stay out of. So Leontiades, he was the man that, on the inside, the Theban oligarch that led the coup, and he was kind of in charge from that point on. Now, recall that Androclides and Pelopidas and the prominent Theban Democrats, the most aggressive and outspoken, a lot of them fled rather than get caught up in this coup, especially because they killed the most powerful Theban Democrat, Ismenias, shortly after the coup. And he had been around for decades. So had Leontiades. So that's part of what made the whole thing such a big surprise, was that you still had the same leaders, but something very different happened, which was, of course, this coup. So Leontiades was not finished. He, even though the city was well in the hands of the oligarchs, he knew those Democrats that got away could be a problem. So he sent out assassins. Now, the assassins were not terribly successful, but they did kill one man amongst the Democrats. It happened to be the leader. They only got one kill, but it was the actual leader, Androclides. So he went down, whereas all the other targeted leaders or followers managed to either defeat the assassins or get away. That includes Pelopidas. I can picture him fighting off an assassin, a very aggressive, proud, zealous man, not shy about fighting. I can almost picture him, defeating the assassin that came for him, or multiples, especially if he was in a group. And this just spurred on their need to do something about this. Not only has their city been taken, but they're getting attacked. So this gives them less to lose. If they're still a target of murder, then there's less risk in them putting themselves at risk to try and win their city back. I mean, they're already at risk of getting killed just sitting there. So they may as well try to accomplish something, right? Now, Leontiades had also worked the Spartan angle here. Since they were his friends, he had been pro-Spartan for a long time, he wanted some official recognition here. Yes, Sparta had to say, "Oh yeah, we broke the king's peace. We're not supposed to do that," but we already saw how hypocritical they were about that. They didn't really punish Phoibidas. Agesilaus paid the fine he was given. So there was really no charge at all. So the hypocrisy was on display here. So they had no trouble saying, "Yes, Leontiades, we support you. We're on your side. We sign off on your deeds," and which gives them greater political validity. It also puts some force of arms behind it. It's like, well, if you don't agree with me, take it up with Sparta, right? And no one wants to do that, especially not at this era where Sparta hadn't been beaten on land in centuries, and not in any battle of significance. So that's how he was able to execute Ismenias was partly because of this backing from Sparta. And he knew he'd get this backing probably because it was probably prearranged with Agesilaus, as we all said. So as I said, that this backfired a bit because they only killed Androclides, and not only did that spur the Theban exiles into taking action because they were afraid of getting murdered, so they had to go take out the guy that was murdering them, but it put Pelopidas in charge. Instead of the cautious elder Androclides, who had a more patient, slow moving, let's see how it works out, let's try to talk to people, let's see what happens, let it play out. Pelopidas was like, no, let's go. I am a man of action, not a man of talk. I want to take our city back. Now, that said, he had to spend some time getting people to agree with him. And while this was taking place, Sparta was increasing their hold on the region. They didn't just stop at holding Thebes. They started detaching smaller cities that were allied to Thebes and putting their own garrisons in there, including the closest cities, the places like Plataea and Thespia. Those are really close to Thebes, like 10, 15 miles away. Now, these are puppet regimes, of course. They just install whoever the local rich folk oligarchs are, the ones who have the ambition to lead, they put them in charge with Spartan garrisons to back them up. So this is another ascent of power. So they're not only did they expand on the capture of Thebes, they're trying to capture and control Thebes' former allies, which is one way of really locking things down. And this is another thing that was predicted when Sparta was put in charge of the Persian king's peace that we discussed last time. It was supposed to keep Greece in line and keep them from having too much civil war. But really what it did was give Sparta license to slowly dominate the entire peninsula of Greece, the entire Peloponnese and the northern part where Thebes and Athens were. Now, different things were playing out in Thebes. We had the hostile, aggressive, passionate party now led by Pelopidas, but his contemporary Epaminondas favored patient and less violent resistance. He was definitely a long game kind of guy. He took a bit of a risk by staying behind. He didn't flee with the rest of the exiles, but his philosophy made him poor by choice. He lived a life of poverty because he thought it was morally correct. That also had the effect of making him seem like less a threat. They're like, well, what threat is this guy? He's just a poor guy that, like, what's he going to do? He's not going to bring a bunch of warriors in. How could he do that? He's got no money. In this era, we've seen how much money is driving things, especially because of Persia. This guy with no money, he didn't seem like a threat. Mistake. That was a mistake. Epaminondas would very soon become known in Sparta as one of their biggest enemies, but they certainly didn't catch it at this point. Sparta's not necessarily good at... They don't have much imagination, a very conservative state in that sense. They try to keep things the way they are. They prefer the old way. Epaminondas was very innovative and creative and thinking of new ways to do things that Sparta had never considered. So... a very interesting thing about Epaminondas. He and Pelopidas both came from pretty good families, Pelopidas even more so. But Epaminondas, as I said, he kind of shunned a lot of the wealth and, privilege that came with that station. He thought it was more noble and ethical to adopt a poor attitude, living like a poor person, which so Sparta, you can see how that kind of agrees with some things they were trying to do in Sparta, but it was more lip service than reality in this era. Sparta was falling off of a lot of those values, but you can see how this is a similar thing. Like your life is more noble and honorable when you aren't distracted by money. Money makes you a slave of your money. That was a common belief in ancient Greece. We can see that now too. That hasn't changed, has it? Some people absolutely are slaves to their own money. You may be rich, and I think it, takes you away from some of the burdens of the world, but it can also trap you if you aren't careful. So Epaminondas and his brother were Pythagoreans. Now, their mother and father were alive at this time too. This is pretty interesting. Pythagoreans, what is that? You all have probably heard of the Pythagorean theorem. Yeah, Pythagoras was super interesting. He was almost a cult leader at this time, but he was very obsessed with the idea that the whole universe functioned via math. He's kind of right. I mean, to a certain extent, he is. There's certainly a lot of math you can deduce from the universe. A lot of math underpins a lot of what's going on out there. That doesn't mean it's the point or the purpose or the full explanation. But he was way ahead of his time in thinking that. However, he approached it, more religiously and culty, as I said. Now, he had died well before any of this, maybe 100, 150 years. The Pythagoreans were not very liked. A lot of other people saw them as some weird cult. Hey, and who are they to speak? They're sacrificing animals to deities all the time, but yet these guys are weird because they like numbers? Yeah. Anyway, he was also vegetarian, which is odd for that era, but cool, interesting. A very high-minded individual, despite being kind of weird and a little unscrupulous at times. Like he, at one point, he hid himself in a basement for a month and then came out all like white-faced because he was pale from not having been in the sun, and he was a little emaciated from lack of eating. He claimed he had been to the underworld, which, come on, man, you didn't go to the underworld. You were in your basement. Anyway, something that happened multiple times to the Pythagoreans was firebomb attacks. People would find their headquarters, their meeting place, and try to burn them all alive while they were in there. This happened multiple times. This may have even been how Pythagoras died. Now, there was a Pythagorean student called Lysis. Lysis fled to Thebes after one of these, well, it was actually called Pythagorean Holocaust. Holocaust with a lowercase h, because this is the dictionary definition of Greek Holocaust is just people dying by fire. And so he fled. He was one of the few people that survived. He fled to Thebes, and Epaminondas' family took him in. He lived with them. And so Epaminondas and his brother Cephisodoros were students of Lysis, or students of Pythagoras through Lysis. And when Lysis died, they buried him themselves. They dug his grave, Epaminondas and his brother. So they were very impacted by his philosophy, very high-minded, very thoughtful, but also men of Thebes, people that are in the midst of a revolution. And so, yes, all these high-minded ideals exist, but there's no place in this world for people who are against violence entirely. That just isn't going to fly in this era. So, and Epaminondas was not ignorant of that. As part of his long game, he would train the young men of Thebes. Very normal for Greeks of all statuses, but in cities, to do exercise. The gymnasium, that's a Greek word. It was very common for people to exercise in groups, especially young men. It was considered important. I mean, it is today too. It is important, right? Exercise is very useful and good for you, right? So what happened was he would encourage the Theban youths to challenge the Spartan garrison men to wrestling matches. Nothing strange about this. This is normal. Like, wrestling is a sport. It'd be like challenging them to a game of pickup basketball. Like, sure, let's play a game of basketball. And whenever the Thebans would win, they'd be a little proud, and Epaminondas would approach them and say something like, "You're proud of beating the Spartans, huh? That's good. Yeah, you should be. Then why are we still living under their occupation? You're able to beat them, but we're still dominated by them. They own our city, huh? So he started to get that into their minds, just to plant that seed that, like, hey, if we're capable of beating them, doesn't that make it all the more shameful that we're conquered by them? We're proving that we can beat them, right? Even though it's just wrestling, it's not combat, it's not, shields and spears and swords, but still, it makes them think they can win in war if they can win in practice war, right? It still gives them some confidence, and the whole shame angle worked a little bit. A lot of them were like, he's kind of got a point there. But like I said, that's a long game. You can't just drop that on somebody and expect them to immediately turn and go, let's get the Spartans, let's fight them now. It's something that you have to kind of ponder and let other people talk about it. Let all the young men of Thebes get the idea and slowly build that fire within them and slowly build that confidence too. But one thing he also did differently was he didn't just do this with the middle class and wealthier youth. He taught the poor of Thebes as well, who are normally not really included in these things. Like, they're often not included in things in modern times. Just like in any society, the poorest of the poor often just get ignored or forgotten or trampled on, or one or more versions of that. Epaminondas was not about that. He's like, no, we're all Thebans here. If we're going to throw off the yoke of Sparta, we're going to need all the help we can get. And he was very respected, not just because of his demeanor and because of his discipline and personal self-control. He was also descended from the Spartioi. Nothing to do with Sparta. It's a similar word. Spartioi translates as something familiar here, dragon men. Dragon men, yes, they were this legendary, mythical foundation of Thebes. There was a guy, Cadmus, that's why their main fort's called the Cadmea. Cadmus fought this dragon back in the day that was guarding the important body of water, Lake Copaeus, I think it is, near Thebes. And when he killed that dragon, he took some of the teeth and sewed them into the ground. And they grew up. They popped out of the ground as these so-called Spartioi, the fighting men. They came out fighting immediately, dragon men, because they came from dragon teeth. So this was an important, bloodline to be a part of. A lot of Theban men were part of that, but Epaminondas could very clearly trace his descent to that, at least in terms of how they believe these things. So this is a whole generation of Theban men under an occupation that at this point, let's say, is going to take a few years. And he very gradually taught them that, hey, you can beat Sparta. Now, let's not forget how pervasive the view of Spartan dominance was throughout Greece. Agesilaus and other Spartan kings had learned to use fear of Sparta as a weapon as much as their actual infantry and armies were a weapon. So a charismatic veteran hipparch means cavalry commander. Lots of arcs, like you've seen Trierarch and other arcs within George's writings. Those are all Greek titles. So this guy Gorgidas, he was bullied by the Spartans. They were like, hey, we hear that you Thebans, when one of you is sworn in as a cavalry commander, you're brought to the secret tomb of Dirce. Anyone who's going to be sworn in as a cavalry leader goes to this secret tomb. They don't tell anybody else where it is, and you do like a little ritual. Now, he's like, no, I'm not telling you where to get this. Now, remember what I said last time. The Spartans were big on tombs. They wanted to harness the power of heroic and legendary and mythical tombs. This is something they tried to do all throughout Greece, was like take the sacred artifacts and bring them back to Sparta. It would make their city-state more powerful. That's what they believed. So that's what they were doing here. They're like, hey, Gorgidas, give us the access to that tomb or else. Gorgidas is a bit of a Blackfish character. Tough guy, cavalry commander, had been around a while. I don't know we don't actually know how old he was, but I get the vibe that he's an older guy that's part of this youth movement, like an older man that's helping the youth as part of a change, an era of change here. So because of his courage, because he just flatly refused and showed no fear in this, they backed down. The Spartans were like, all right, well, we respect your courage here, plus they respect the religious vow he must have taken. Remember, the Spartans are very pious. Sometimes you could use this against them. He's like, look, I took a vow to the gods not to reveal. It's not me. I'm not saying, it's not my personal wish. I took a vow to the gods not to reveal this, and I cannot break that vow. You understand, Spartans, you're pious. Something like that happened. They're like, actually, that's a good point. All right, fine. Another man, Philodas, he played the long game. Rather than being exiled, rather than sticking around like Epaminondas and sort of playing a long game in terms of resistance by teaching people how to resist and encouraging them to, he was a bit of a mole. He pretended to be an oligarch, and he's talented. He worked his way up to be chief of staff to the Polemarchs, the three Polemarchs of Thebes. He was like their assistant, their adjutant, and he was a mole, though. So a mole to the Polemarchs, that makes him a molemarch. That's right. Now, back in Sparta, Agesilaus had a growth on his good leg and became ill. So he was out of action for a little while, and it looked like it might take his life. Let's see what happens there. Meanwhile, in Persia, let's remember our character Chabrias the cocksure, Chabrias the confident, who I've had some time to think about him a little more. And he's Jaime Lannister, y'all. He's a fancy Jaime Lannister. Not that Jaime Lannister isn't fancy, but he's like if Jaime Lannister were even more of a spender and a guy who liked to show his wealth, which, as a Lannister, that's just like, you're going to do that anyway, even just by living your life. So Still a young guy, super confident. He hires himself out as a mercenary to Egypt to command armies for the arguably rebel Pharaoh Hakor. It's like, is he a rebel or not? And the reason it's unclear is because Egypt broke away from the Persian Empire quite a while ago, like 20 years prior. Are they still rebels at this point? It kind of feels like they've reestablished their independence, but Persia isn't done. They want to reconquer Egypt. So since before Artaxerxes took the throne, Egypt has been in rebellion. Like I said, you could arguably say they've just been independent, but Persia hadn't given up on it. They just were too distracted by other things. Now, it's very hard to invade Egypt. Just the natural defenses there, the rivers, the Nile, all that stuff. It's really, really difficult. So Chabrias actually seems to have been hired by the general Nakhtennebeth rather than directly by Pharaoh Hakor. And this tests the parameters of the king's peace, doesn't it? This is a really kind of skirting the line here. Maybe a letter of the law type of squeezing through here. Because Athens wasn't fighting against Persia, but their general was. Their general signed on with Egypt, but he signed on as a private citizen. It wasn't an official capacity. He's not there as a representative of Athens. So it's like, what? Well, is that violating the king's peace or not? So they're like, I don't really know. Now, remember, Chabrias was already helping King Evagoras of Cyprus. Cyprus is that island that sits off the coast there, due east of Crete, and it's off and on been its own kingdom. It was trying to be at this point, as Persia, or as Egypt was trying to keep its independence, Cyprus was as well, and they were working together for a bit. Hakor was sending money to Evagoras. Evagoras was fighting the Persians, and Chabrias had already helped King Evagoras. He had already helped ambush a Spartan garrison. He tricked them into emerging and killed them. So Chabrias was showing a lot of that skill, a lot of that Jaime Lannister, maybe a little bit of Robb Stark thrown in there too. Young man who was very good at setting up ambushes and leading men in a tactical fashion. But also, as I said, with Jaime, the kind of guy that people like to follow, a charismatic person whose confidence was infectious. So Artaxerxes finally did get back around to preparing to reinvade Egypt after all these other things were happening. He gave the job to our friend Pharnabazus, the paymaster, the one who had bribed the hell out of Greece, the guy who got Agesilaus to come back by bribing Thebes to attack him. And he's like, he was trying to invade Persia, but Pharnabazus bribed Greece enough to force Agesilaus to return. So he didn't do it himself. Artaxerxes appointed Pharnabazus, like I said, and Pharnabazus just really took a long time. We're not going to come back to this for a little while. Pharnabazus was as effective as he had been before. For some reason, he was moving really slowly here. So we'll have to come back to this. But sticking with Persia, Artaxerxes actually did take the field with a huge army against an Iranian tribe called the Cadusii. Let's not forget, Persia's center of power is in modern-day Iran. He took Tirabazus with him. Remember, Tirabazus was an important commander last time around, too. Tirabazus may be the only reason Artaxerxes got out of any of this alive. So Artaxerxes, maybe not listening to his more experienced commanders, just took his massive army into a very sparse territory where there isn't a lot of food. Supplies run low, and the army starts to face starvation. An important man, the satrap governor of Cappadocia, was killed. But his son, Datames, who was of the royal bodyguard, the king's guard of Persia, distinguished himself. So you got one member of the family dying, but this up-and-comer really stands out, one of the most outstanding men in the whole campaign. But the more outstanding was Tirabazus, as I said. He took a page from the same, A Storm of Swords. He took a page from Sam Tarley's book. Remember what Sam did to get Jon elected Lord Commander? He told Dennis Mallister, they're going to pick Cotter Pike. You know, if we don't pick now, Stannis is going to make Cotter Pike our commander. And he went and told Cotter Pike, hey, if we don't vote today and choose a commander, Stannis is going to name Dennis Mallister. So he told them each the opposite thing, got them to move. This exact same thing happened here. Tirabazus went to one Caducean faction, his son went to the other, and they both said, yo, the other faction is agreeing to peace with our king. You guys are going to be left out. We're going to help them kill you unless you come to terms also. You better do that. It worked. Both factions of the Caducei hated each other enough that they believed this story and reestablished peace with Artaxerxes. So after the campaign, Datames, who did such a great job, Datames, I don't know how to say it. Datames sounds cooler. That name means to whom force is given. What a cool name. He was promoted to his father's position. It's sort of hereditary, but sort of isn't. It's kind of confusing. The Persian king has power to undo that, but normally these governorships just pass to a family member. Many people called Datames the greatest non-Greek warrior / general not named Hannibal or Hamilcar. And Hannibal and Hamilcar haven't been born yet. They are enemies of Rome. They're not going to have anything to do with our story. Now, let's not forget about our Circe, Parysatis. She had likely returned to the royal court at this point. Remember, she had been banished to Babylon because of the whole business with murdering her own son's wife, Statera. She poisoned her and all that, Now, she hadn't lost her substantial incomes through all that, so she still had her spy network, most likely. And eventually, she talked her way into getting back to court because she just had so much control over her son Artaxerxes. It's almost like a Visenya Magor kind of situation. So there's a little bit of Circe and Parysatis, but the situation's a little more like Magor Visenya. So Tirabazus, after saving the army with his ploy against the Caduceans, was rewarded handsomely, which you would expect. The Persians are super rich. He performed great service. Artaxerxes was personally there to witness it. So it's not even word of mouth. He saw it happen. He was like, yeah, good job, Tirabazus. So he offers Tirabazus his daughter Atossa in marriage. This is one of his important daughters, quote unquote. Now, what I mean by that, this was his daughter, one of his daughters by his actual wife, Statera, the one that Parysatis had murdered. Now, I have to point out this distinction because Artaxerxes had like 100 daughters. He had concubines. So he is having daughters all over the place and sons, but they're not they're not born of marriage, which even to them makes a difference. Not as much a difference as it makes in Westeros, but it makes a difference. Now, Parysatis had noticed that Artaxerxes was attracted to Atossa. Let's make sure you understand. Grandma noticed that her son was into her granddaughter, his own daughter. Ugh, right? Well, this is an incestuous family. However, father-daughter incest was not a thing in Persia, even though brother-sister and some of this, it was like the Targaryens. They had the same limit there. They're like, okay, we'll do brother-sister, we'll maybe even do uncle-niece, but we're not going to go any farther than that. Until now. Because Parysatis was like, what's a way to make my son even more powerful, or to seem even more powerful? Breaking rules that no one's allowed to break. That's one. And here's one of them. So he offers Atossa to Tirabazus in marriage and then reneges. He's like, actually, never mind. I'm going to marry her myself. And this was Parysatis' idea, that she planted in her son's head, and he did it. He married his own daughter on the advice of his own mother. Yeah, that happened. Yikes. Back to Greece, as part of Sparta's campaign to strip Thebes of its power, they rebuilt the city of Plataea, which was very close to Thebes and had been a Theban ally, but in its rebuilt state was very much allied to Sparta. In fact, it was Sparta who had destroyed it in the first place 46 years prior. Let's move to the year 380. In the 100th Olympiad, the naked sprint was won by Dionysiodorus of Taranto. Taranto is southern Italy, because, of course, southern Italy at this point was still very Greek. Northern Italy was Italian, is where the Romans were and all those. But Greeks were the dominant culture in southern Italy at this time. The boys' naked sprint was won by Deinalocos of Ilis, And the long-distance naked race was won by Sotades of Crete. Again, he had won it the last time in the 99th Olympiad. You probably don't remember the name, so I have to remind you. But yeah, this guy won again. The boys' boxing was won by Hippos of Elis. The pancration by Xenophon of Cilicia, not to be confused with the Xenophon, the author warrior who pops up often in our story because he is one of the main sources on all this. And a contemporary. He was an Athenian who actually fought under Agesilaus and was Agesilaus' friend. He got banned from Athens because he was too friendly to Sparta. The boys' pancration was won by Aurelius Eurycopides of Athens. Now, the fact that there's even a boys' pancration is kind of wild. They also had boys' boxing, but yeah, man, there's a little bit more of a violent society, wasn't it? But pancration, you may recall, is basically mixed martial arts. It's the UFC in a very infant form, you know? The only thing that you couldn't do besides biting was eye gouging or aiming for the groin. You couldn't like pummel the groin. You could accidentally hit it. People got away with that. In Sparta, though, they were like, nah, there's no rules. Anything you can do. So Sparta was not allowed to compete in the pancration for the most part because they just wouldn't obey the rules. They're like, you can't bite or eye gouge. And they're like, try to stop me. Okay, we will stop you. Sparta, you're not allowed to have competitors enter this event. And that's apparently what happened. So now, some of this I may have explained last time, but just in case it wasn't clear, in boxing and pancration, they didn't have rounds. Like we have rounds now. Like you could fight for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes to take a break. Go back at it. They didn't do that. They fought outdoors in the summer where it was really hot. Really hot. And they were at least naked, so they didn't have clothing slowing them down. But boy, it's brutal. You know, no breaks, no rules, except for these very few rules that were kind of loosely followed. And as I said, no women spectators. In fact, illegal spectators. And it wasn't just women who were banned. It was non-Greeks for the most part. The rules changed. We're talking about something that existed for hundreds of years. But it was like a punishment of death for that kind of business, right? So that's that. Back to Egypt. Pharaoh Hakor had to stop helping King Iphicrates against Cyprus because things were just going too badly. He was too busy dealing with threats within his own borders while also worried about Persia. Now, in his 13th year, which we're in here, Hakor died. He was replaced by his son, Nepherites II. Despite the threat from Persia, or perhaps because of it, he only lasted 4 months before being overthrown and killed by General Nectanebeth, the one who probably hired Chabrias to help them all out, but actually hired Chabrias to help him become king, rather Pharaoh. And that's what happened. Nectanebeth took the name Nectanebo I. And Isis as his patron deity. He started to do a little bit of religious reforming. Kind of like how we just said, every Greek city-state has its own different relationship with the gods. Same thing's true in Egypt. They have they have a big, wide pantheon, and they view different gods differently depending on who you're talking to, what city it is, what era it is. So the end of Pharaoh Hakor and Nepherites II, that was the 29th royal dynasty of Egypt. It only lasted 18 years, so it wasn't really a big deal, but still 29? And this is the beginning of the 30th. Nectanebo I, that is. He is the first of the 30th dynasty of Egypt. Wild. So yeah, Chabrias probably helped Nectanebo's coup. And this is a good example of the proxy war phenomenon, where two more powerful nations go to war within the borders of a third nation, where they're both sending armies and armies and money to a third nation where this is playing out. Now, Pharnabazus, the paymaster, the guy who's taking his time building this army to invade Egypt, he's, slow, as I said, but he's still competent, especially in the matters of money and intrigue and politics. He went to Athens and was like, what the hell, y'all? Chabrias is fighting for Egypt. You're supposed to be on our side. The king's peace is in effect. Athens is signed on to that. So what the hell are you doing with your general fighting for these rebels? They're like, sorry? They didn't want to risk an incident. They didn't want Persia mad at them. So they're like, hey, Chabrias, will you come home? Will you come back? This is a problem. He's like, yeah, all right, fine. I got some money out of it. I gained a little glory. It's fine. I'll come home. I don't care. You know, it's not a big deal. His confidence is unaffected. Nothing could affect this guy's confidence. How could this be a failure? He got some money, got some reputation. Athens was embarrassed. He wasn't. So, but Athens was like, yeah, but maybe that's not enough. We recalled Chabrias. We gave him a local command. He's about to pop up again. So to help things out, to continue to make sure these relations with Persia didn't sour, they sent Iphicrates the innovator, the guy that changed the shoes and the spears and the shields to a point that it made an enormous difference. His changes, his innovations were used by Rome. Rome's two most important things were marching long distances, which you can't do without good footwear, y'all. Simple as that, right? And the fortified camp. Armies in this era just pitched camp where they would, and you know, whatever happens, happens. By the Roman era, the Romans were big on every night we dig a moat. We build a fortress. We build a fortress out of wood every night. We may come back to that the next night, but if we move 10 miles forward, we build a new fortress. Rome was really hardcore about that. And they got this idea probably from Iphicrates. No other Greek general, no Persian general did this. He's like, every time we go to bed at night, we have a heavily defended camp. No one's attacking us in the night and getting any progress out of that. So it's kind of weird to think about that. Like, they didn't do that back then. It's like, well, one guy figured out that they should. So they took Chabrias away from Egypt and gave Iphicrates to Persia. And they also Pharnabazus was like, okay, cool, Iphicrates, I'm going to let you be in charge of all the Greek soldiers. Because he had a lot of soldiers from a lot of armies, because Persia's a big empire, right? So Iphicrates was in charge of the Greeks there. Meanwhile, in the north, Sparta is continuing to help their ally Amyntas III, the king of Macedon. Now, he is at war with the Chalcidian League. Of course, as these stories go on, there's just so many leagues. There's always a bunch of Greek city-states forming this or that league. It just means alliance, right? It's just a group, and sometimes these leagues end and then reform. Don't need to worry about it too much. Chalcis is like a little peninsula. The northern part of Greece kind of juts out there from northern Greece, northern Macedon there. But Sparta and Macedonia, they're not just allies of circumstance here. Sure, Sparta tends to support the kings because they have kings. They support, rule by the few. So they have a natural, ideology pairing here. But it goes a lot deeper than that. Sparta and Macedonia had an ancient connection, or rather their royal families did. Sparta's two kings, right? Sparta has two kings. One from one royal line, one from the other. There's only two royal lines. That didn't really change. The Eurypontid, which was Agesilaus at this point, and the Aegead, which is what Agesilaus is the current king for Sparta for. And both of those dynasties are from the Heraclidae, which, remember, that's a big deal that Lysander brought up. It just means you're a descendant of Heracles. Your family line can be traced to that. Claiming descent from Heracles had value all over Greece, but it especially had value in places like Thebes, where Heracles was supposedly born, and it had a lot of value in Macedonia because Amyntas himself was part of a dynasty that descended from the Heracleids. So he was a Heraclean as well. So that's an ancient connection between Sparta and Macedonia. They both had royal families that descend from Heracles. Now, Thebes, like I said, they had Heraclidae too, and others, but they didn't have kings that descend from that because they didn't have kings at all. Now, Amyntas III had a son around this time who he named Philip. This is his third-born son, so you might be wondering why we care about this third-born son. Well, this Philip is going to be important. There's lots of Philips. Luckily, unlike our medieval chronology episodes, we don't have too much of the problem of the same guys with the same names. A lot, it certainly happens here, but not a lot. So, but there are a good number of Philips. So why are we following this particular Philip? Well, you'll see. He'll keep popping up. His birth is important because of how big he's going to be later. But for now, here's another fun connection. King Amyntas of Macedon, Philip's father, he had a doctor named Nicomachus. It's his personal doctor. It's his friend. He was from a town in the Chalcidian League there. And Nicomachus was supposedly descended from another guy named Nicomachus, who was the son of Machaon, who was the son of Asclepius, the god of medicine. Yeah, that's wild, right? So this doctor, that's a pretty good thing to have on your resume as a doctor. It's like, yo, I descend from the god of medicine. There's my, credentials as a doctor. What kind of university degree can match up with that, yo? Right? So it's a pretty powerful thing, right? Now, Asclepius was said to be so powerful that he could bring the dead back to life. He couldn't bring himself back to life, though, which is a problem because Zeus killed him. Because Zeus was worried about that power of his. Zeus was worried about the same thing that we're worried about in A Song of Ice and Fire. The long summer that never ends. The thing that Bonero preaches. That you follow R'hllor and there will be a summer that doesn't end and no one will die. We'll all live forever. And it's like, that doesn't sound good, actually. Zeus didn't think so either. He was worried that Asclepius would just do that to everyone. He would give all humanity undying. He'd make everyone undying amongst humanity. He's like, I can't have that happen, so I'm going to kill him. Now, this story continues because Nicomachus and his wife Phaestus had a son recently who was about 4. His name was Aristotle. You might know the name. Yeah. One of the most famous people from all the ancient world, probably the single most influential person from the ancient world, especially if you limit it to non-war things. In terms of philosophy, learning, just influence in a lot of areas. He was a polymath. He was just an expert in so many different things. Yeah. Digging into Aristotle is like, wow, this guy, it's really hard to find someone from the ancient world that has a bigger influence on today. And boy, his influence is massive. So as well, we talked about how the Spartans were still campaigning north of Thebes during this, because remember, the whole reason they went there in the first place was to punish the city of Olynthus, which had broken the king's peace. Right? And they broke the king's peace in a way that got involved here with Amyntas and Sparta, right? Because Sparta didn't want them to have a league. It violated the king's peace. Amyntas didn't want them to have a league because they're on his border. He didn't want his neighboring Greek city-states to be powerful. He would much rather have them be fractured and separate. That's much better for him. Now, Agesilaus is still back in Sparta himself because he's ill. He had that leg thing or that problem with his illness, whatever it was. So Agesilaus is the one out there. Agesilaus isn't a young man, but he hasn't been king for very long. So he's doing sieges and battles, and he gets a fever during one of the sieges. Doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but in the ancient world, a lot of fevers can turn into a big deal, and this one did. He died. So Agesilaus outlasts another king from the other Spartan dynasty, still going, and now we have Cleombrotus. That's the new king. That's Agesilaus' brother. Agesilaus never had any children, so Cleombrotus ascends, and Agesilaus immediately starts sinking his hooks into him. Like, okay. He had successfully got Agesilaus to focus more on relationships and partying in order to free himself up to have more power for himself, right? It was classic move. Get another powerful person distracted by desires of the flesh, pleasures of the flesh, and leave the power to me. It kind of backfired here, though, didn't it? You got a guy that maybe wasn't as robust as he should have been, or as attentive to military matters, and he might have finished the campaign sooner and gotten home before that fever. But nope. Cleombrotus is he's a bit of a Spartan Ed Muir Tully. Kind of passive, for a country that's very aggressive, especially now they're bullying the entire country of Greece, the entire region, and they aren't shy about it. They're not shy about being hypocrites either, as we've seen. This guy is a little bit. He's not a pushover, but he's not super violent either. He's definitely not aggressive at the same time. So he's a bit of a different animal here. That's it for the year 380. Let's go to 379. In Rome, 6 military tribunes with consular powers were elected. 4 of them were named Lucius. Amyntas III and Sparta achieved victory. They defeated Olynthus finally, and Amyntas went back to his capital, gets back his capital. Because if you recall, what happened was Amyntas loaned some of his territory to the Chalcidian League. He's like, hold on to this for me because I can't hang on to it. I need to go fight these other people. We're friends. You can hold on to this for me, and then you give it back to me later, and I'll give you rewards, and we'll have a deal. It's not what happened. The Chalcidian League is like, actually, we're going to keep this. So that's part of where the problems came in the first place. Now, the Chalcidian League was ended because of this, right? And as I said, this caused problems later because without this Northern Alliance, well, what have I said since the beginning of this series? That there's a threat to the north. That Greece is beating each other up while it should be more concerned with this threat to the north. I haven't exactly outlined what this threat is. I haven't told you exactly what that means. We'll get to it. It's not quite ready yet either. If you're thinking maybe Macedonia is a part of it, you're on the right track. So this is definitely one of the conditions that's created to help Greece lose their independence, something that none of them saw coming. And in fact, the Chalcidian League is going to reform later, but weaker, without any Macedonian parts. So it's not going to be much of an obstacle to the powers from the north. Now, he renegotiated a timber deal he had with Athens. He had lost it while he had lost his part of his kingdom. This is such a strange thing. He didn't renegotiate the deal directly with Athens, through their public infrastructure, which is how most things are done there. He went straight to Timotheus, who was the son of Conon, who was one of the Athenian admirals that was fighting with the Persians and then against them, and then they threw him in jail, and then he got out, and then he died. So this is his son picking up right where he left off. He's an Athenian admiral, and he's quite a deal maker. I don't have a great comp for him in A Song of Ice and Fire. I feel like there is one, but I just couldn't come up with it. So, this is a good opportunity. Someone who's a good deal maker. He's a general, but he's more of a statesman than a warrior, but he is capable of that as well. Now, nearby, also in the north, is Thessaly. Thessaly is closer to Thebes and Boeotia than Macedon. So it's like Thessaly is to the north, and then a little farther north is Macedonia. So this guy, Lycophron, had formed a tyranny in Thessaly. He was the tyrant of Pherae, which nowadays is called Velestino. It's kind of southeast in Thessaly. Now, like Macedonia, Thessaly is horse country, and their cavalry is famous and excellent. So Lycophron had formed, the tyranny. Again, tyranny in Greece isn't quite the same as tyranny now. It just means popular leader. He was elected through popular acclaim, seized power unlawfully. But that doesn't mean they're a bad guy. Usually they are. Power going to people's heads, that's a lot of power to have. But sometimes these tyrants were actually good, benevolent dictators type things. We don't know if Lycophron was or not. There's not a lot of history there. But his son, this guy, we're very interested in. So when he died, Jason took over, Jason of Pherae. He inherited the tyranny and started to expand it. He started to conquer some of the other little regions within Thessaly, and eventually he was named Tagus, which is magistrate, leading guy in Thessaly. They don't have kings, but they have these high titles. And you get the impression that he got this because he was so powerful, not because they thought he was the right man for the job. It could be both. He was very capable. This is an extremely talented, ambitious, and capable man. He was noteworthy as a youth for doing really wildly ambitious and bold things against his own family, in some cases. For example, he kidnapped his mother's favorite slave and held her for ransom. Well, yeah, Mom, you can't have this slave back until you pay me. Like, what? Who does that? Well, he did. He also, would arrange religious devotions, events, where everyone gives a little money, and he would just pocket the money. There was very little given to the gods or whatever. Yeah, he just got away with all these sort of things because he was powerful and he was so capable. So he was also an innovator, both of strategy, tactics, logistics, and kind of along the lines of Iphicrates. Not quite that intense, but he invented a new type of armor called the hemothorax, which is like a stomach armor. Because like Greek hoplites, you see your helmet, you got your breastplate, you maybe got some armor on your arms, and maybe you got greaves, which are like thigh armor. Not much else. So a stomach armor is a pretty big deal. Wasn't armor for regular folk. It was only for rich guys because it was hard to make. And we're going to see this armor used in covert missions because it's something you can easily conceal under your robes or your tunic or what have you. So Jason knew Pelopidas. They were acquaintances, maybe even friends. And Jason wanted a balanced Greece. He wanted Thebes and Athens and Sparta to all be kind of equal in power, kind of like Persia did. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why did this guy care? He doesn't even live there. He's north of Greece. What does he care about these nations, these city-states south of him? Why does he want balance there? What's his angle? Well, generally speaking, there's several examples of this throughout history. When someone wants a balance of power in Greece, it's because they want to control Greece for themselves. They have designs on Greece. Jason had designs on Greece. First, he had to prove how good he was. He had to prove how capable he was. He had to build his own power base. But all along the way, whenever he had influence to wield, he would push towards that balance. If one of the three was losing power, he would, maybe give them a little help or argue that they should have help, just to try to keep that balance, right? He didn't want things to get too bad. He didn't want Greece just overwhelmed by civil war, but he also didn't want them to be too strong. No one power to be dominant, because if one power was really dominant, well, he'd have to take on that one power rather than a divide and conquer strategy. Jason also spoke of invading Persia, that same Greek dream that has existed ever since the time of Thermopylae in the Battle of the 300, getting back at Persia. Remember, Thermopylae happened in 480. We're in 379 or 380. We're 100 years later, and they still had that dream. Remember, Agesilaus was on that trip. He's like, I'm in Persia. I got an army. I'll just keep going east, beat them entirely. Obviously, that things changed. He had to go back home to Sparta. He couldn't do that. But this is another guy expressing that same dream. And Jason's also very interesting because he didn't have a citizen army behind him. He had mercenaries, sellswords. But they were kind of not mercenaries because they were full-time. And that made them way more dangerous. All they did all day was train for war. And Jason trained with them. In fact, he had high standards for his mercenary. He wouldn't just hire any mercenary. He would only hire ones that could keep up with him, stamina-wise. It's very similar to what Bronn did when Tyrion was like, hey, hire me some sellswords. And Bronn's like, all right, well, to make sure we're hiring a good person, a useful guy, I tell them to try to kill me. And Tyrion's like, what happens if one of them does? He's like, well, you're going to want to hire that guy. That guy's competent. Clearly, if you can kill me, Bronn, a skilled swordsman, you want that guy in your team. So he's kind of flippant about it, but it does show you that he's keeping a certain baseline of quality. He's not just like, well, you look like a fighter, bring him on. No, I want to see how good you actually are. It's obviously not a fight to the death. That wouldn't accomplish much. But yeah, so Jason, he was building a mercenary army of people who were not just competent, but could keep up with him. And he had high standards for his own physique, for his own stamina, for his own just ability to withstand the rigors of campaign, hot, cold, sleeping outdoors, anything. He would take it on. He would not shirk. He wouldn't have his soldiers go through anything he wouldn't go through, which is a interesting combination because usually sellsword / mercenaries, they follow the money. But this guy's like, one of the problems there is they follow the money. So what could happen to me one day is Persia, using Persia as an example, he's surely aware of what Persia's capable of. It's like, what if Persia just bribes all my mercenaries away from me? Well, this was his answer to that. They were becoming loyal to him for not just money, but because they liked him. They looked up to him. They respected him. So it's not so easy to pull guys away that are in that mindset. You know, it's harder to bribe people away when they're like, no, we kind of like this guy. And we don't like Persians. That's another thing. There was a lot of like Persian, you know, like racism almost, you know, like we don't like Persian. We like meatism, you know. So Jason had kind of come up with an answer for that problem. As we'll see later, Jason's going to come up with some other interesting answers, clever, innovative answers to a lot of problems or to a lot of traditions, and he's going to get ahead of a lot of things. He's going to keep popping up for a while. But now, let's go to fire and blood and smoke. Back to Thebes. Remember what Leontiades did? He sent assassins after the Theban Democrats, and only one of them succeeded. Androclides was killed, the leader, and that filled the leadership vacuum was filled by Pelopidas and others. Here's a quote. "We ought not to rest here while our beloved land is in the hands of evil rulers. It would be glorious to win back freedom for Thebes. Will you not join with me in saving our native city?" He's a man who loved his city. He was a Theban patriot. He had boundless energy. This is a Brandon Snow. We don't get to know, I'm sorry, not Brandon Snow, Brandon Stark. We didn't get to know Brandon Stark very well, but we know that he had a temper. He was very loyal to his family, though, also. He had a temper to the point where it got him in some trouble. Pelopidas, yeah, he does fit in that category, but he's also high-minded anger, is something they called it. High-minded anger. What does that even mean? What is high-minded anger? Well, it's getting angry at the things you're supposed to get angry at. If you're angry because you didn't get all the money you thought you deserved, that might be greed, actually. You know, it's thinking about yourself. But Pelopidas is more like, no, I'm mad when people dishonor each other. I'm mad when evil is done. I'm mad when justice is not done. He doesn't get mad about petty things. He gets mad about the things that are supposed to matter, the things that we all say are virtues. So that's what high-minded anger is, you know? And I kind of appreciate that. I kind of respect it to a certain degree. Better to have more self-control. But what we're seeing here is we're having a little combo here, a little fire and ice. You got Pelopidas as the fire, Epaminondas a bit of the ice, the calm, rational, thoughtful, long game guy, paired up with the let's get him now, fiery zealot guy. Both of them talented at war as well. So here we are in the year 379. Pelopidas was working that angle for a while, getting support. Eventually, it came together. He got a group with the goal of taking back Thebes. Not by armies, but by subterfuge and intrigue, kind of like the way that Sparta took it from Thebes. They're going to kind of, reverse engineer what just happened. They got about 30 people to sign on, including a guy named Melon and another guy named Charon. Yeah, Charon, like the boat guy, the river Styx boatman. Yeah, this guy is actually named Charon, and it's his house they're going to meet at, which is really symbolic. Like the boatman, the guy that ferries you to the realm of the dead, this is where the conspirators are going to meet. It's like they're either, you can look at that as really negative, like they're about to die. He's boating them over to the underworld, which means they're dead. That sounds like this mission's going to fail. On the other hand, if you've got the river Styx boatman on your side, then, you're in control. It's like, well, death is on your side. That's another way to look at it. And this is such an important distinction. I don't know how they thought about it, but this is the weirdness, the unpredictability of interpreting omens, of things that happen in nature or just weird coincidences. Like, you interpret this as a religious thing, but you can easily interpret it as positive or negative. And we're going to see a lot of that. More people added to the conspiracy. Gorgidas, the cavalry commander. Simmias. Epaminondas and his brother Caphisius signed on. A guy named Caphisidorus. A guy named Meneclides. They took a page from the occupier's book. They waited for a religious festival. Not just any religious festival, the festival of Aphrodite. Aphrodite's festival is pretty important in Thebes because they're such a big deal with love. Their view of Eros is very different than a lot of other cities. A little more on that later, But Thebes is very much a marriage of Ares and Aphrodite, war and love. This is forming now. This bond, or at least it's being extended now. Now, of course, Ares and Aphrodite actually did have children. More on that later. So they had seen the last 3 years how the oligarchs celebrated this festival. It was noteworthy. It was a big party. They got drunk and sloppy and gratuitous. Bringing lots of women in there, just having like what sounds like orgies and all that. And this guy, the Molemarch Philetus, is pushing it. He's like, yeah, y'all, party hard. Party hard. That's right, dude. Go all at it. Aphrodite wants you to do this, having orgies and lust and all that. That's what Aphrodite wants. Do it, y'all. The Spartans weren't really so down with that part of it, but they're like, yes, observe religious festivals. Yes, that's right. But obviously, if you're drunk and thinking about having sex, you're not thinking about war, and that's a very good time to strike. But a different page was taken before this page, a deadly dangerous page. An Athenian priest must have spied on the Thebans, or maybe was included, or maybe it's like an ancient version of Catholic confession where one of the Theban conspirators is like, I need to unburden myself, and the Greek priest is like, I'm going to go tell the Spartans what's going on. So he sent a letter to the Polemarchs, to Archias in particular, or maybe just to whoever's there, to the Polemarchion, the building that runs the military there. And we'll tell you what happens in a minute. This message is making its way to Thebes. Meanwhile, the conspirators are trying to do their thing. So it's like a race. This message is working its way towards Thebes while the conspirators are trying to do something before it even happens. And they don't know this message is on its way. This message that can undo everything, they have no idea it's coming. The next 48 hours are perhaps the most well-documented 48 hours in all of Greek history, which argues for all of the ancient world. Maybe not including the Roman ancient world, but certainly at this point, we don't know Rome that well. So that's cool. We have 12 men at first went alone. They broke up their group into smaller groups to try to avoid detection. They knew they were being watched. Assassins came for them and all that stuff, so they had to be careful. But they chose their time pretty well, and they had some luck on their side. The weather was harsh. It was snowy, windy, so they got to wrap scarves around their faces and have hoods. So you have these groups kind of splitting up into twos and threes so that they can enter the different gates of Thebes from different directions and are less likely to attract notice. Now, some of the younger ones went first because guys like Pelopidas and Melon and definitely Gorgidas, they would be known, they'd be recognized. Actually, Gorgidas wasn't one of the exiles. He was still in Thebes, as I said. So scratch that. But yeah, a lot of these guys are recognizable, so they had to be careful even with their faces covered. Now, inside Thebes, the guy named Charon, one of his friends had a bad dream. And that dream was that Charon's house was pregnant. And when the house gave birth, it gave birth of fire, like a big plume of fire came forth. And that fire spread everywhere except the fort, except the Cadmea. So he's like, oh, that's bad. Does that mean the whole city's toast except for the garrison that we're trying to fight? That's bad. So he and a couple of the other conspirators were like, all right, that's bad. The omens are horrible. They get their own message. So we got multiple messages racing their way to various places here. And they send one guy out, Clydon. They're like, Clydon, go tell everyone the plan's off. We can't do it. This omen is too bad. So Clydon goes home, goes to his horse. He's like, I got to get my horse all saddled and ready. Yeah, saddles are different back then. It's hardly even much of a saddle. Maybe more like a blanket. But they did have bridles. He can't find his bridle. He's like, where's my horse's bridle? He's like, wife, where's my bridle? And she's like, I don't know. Why would I know? He's like, because you're supposed to know. And she's like, don't tell me I'm supposed to know. It's your horse. You're supposed to know. They're so loud that the neighbors start paying attention. They're like, whoa, Clydon and his wife are going at it again. Finally, she's like, your bridle's probably at the neighbors. And he's like, you silly woman, why didn't you just say that in the first place? And she's like, you silly man, you should have known. Anyway, he decided after all that, you know what? This missing bridle, that's an omen. I'm staying home. So he was supposed to go tell them to call the plot off, and he didn't, because he's like, oh, I got to stay home. The missing bridle is clearly a message from the gods, right? So Pelopidas and the other groups, they have no idea that either of these messages were sent, one exposing them, one telling them to back off. They still go. They're still doing their thing. They have no reason to back down. One group of conspirators is walking down the street from one cell to another, conspirator cells, like terrorist cells. They have few different houses in Thebes where all these meetings are taking place. And they're doing their best to stay in small groups, but also to converge on one particular house, Charon's house. So a small group, including a seer named Theocritus, was on their way. They're walking through the streets, and they just encounter none other than Archias himself and Lysinodorus. Lysinodorus is the garrison chief, the Spartan garrison chief. He also happens to be the son of one of the most beautiful women in all of Greek world, which not an important detail, but fun to throw in there. And they had soldiers with them. So you might say, well, maybe they should just try to kill those guys right there and then. Nah, they had soldiers with them. So like, uh-oh, what do we do? And maybe we'll just pass by and nothing will happen. They're walking the opposite way down the street, right? Yeah, maybe nothing will happen. Nah. Archias is like, hold on. Hey, Theocritus, seer, I need to talk to you. And they're like, oh my God, what's going on here? And he's like, I got a religious problem. King Agesilaus wanted us to go open this tomb of Heracles' mother, Alcmene, which is, you guys know where that is. That's over here, outside the city limits or whatever, but it's close by. And they're like, yeah, of course we know about that. Obviously, King Agesilaus, again, trying to loot tombs for the power of Sparta. So he ordered the Lysinodorus to go do that. So Lysinodorus did that. They looted the tomb, which, by the way, the tomb is in Haliartus, which is where Lysander was killed. Let's not forget. So he goes over there, opens the tomb, and he's like, there's no bones here. But there is a bronze tablet with a strange script that they couldn't understand. So that is noteworthy. Like, oh, this is some language we don't know anymore. Shortly after they opened this tomb, Haliartus had a crop failure and a flood. So they were like, all right, that's clearly the gods are pissed. Alcmene herself, Heracles, one of them or both of them, they're mad. So Lysinodorus is like, and Archias asked Theocritus the seer, that's their problem. They're like, how do we properly observe the proper rituals to reseal the tomb, to keep this curse at bay? So he's like, he tells them what they want to hear. He's like, well, you got to do this and this and this. And they realize that this means Lysinodorus is about to leave town to go do that. He's like, you need to, and so Theocritus just implores him to do this quickly. So they actually talk the Spartan garrison chief into leaving maybe a little sooner than he would have. So he leaves the city while they're in the midst of pulling off their plan. Like they're about to go make their move, and they have this stroke of luck where the Spartan garrison chief, they're able to talk him into leaving. So they keep going. They go to the next conspirator's house, this guy named Simmias. I had mentioned him earlier. Simmias was nervous because none other than Leontides himself came to Simmias' door earlier that day, knocked on his door to argue with him about a certain prisoner. Simmias had argued that this prisoner, who was a Democrat, should be exiled and not killed. And Leontides is like, nah, execution. But Leontides, he enjoys a good debate, I suppose. He wasn't going to try to be too authoritative about it. He wanted some consensus, so he wanted to continue the debate. He actually went to Simmias' house and argued with him a bit longer. So that was not great. They were like, well, he did leave, but it made them nervous. The guys they're trying to kill might just, they just come knocking on your door at any moment. Let's remind ourselves of just how small this whole place is, like this world. You got people that just know each other. This isn't like millions of people here. You got people who know each other just walking down the street like this, all these important players. Then another thing happened. Simmias was like, hey, y'all, some stranger came to town and he made a sacrifice at the grave of Lysis, that Pythagorean sage guy we talked about. And then he just went to sleep by the grave. He's freaking me out, y'all. What is up with this guy? Is this a god in disguise? Is this an omen? Epaminondas and his brother speak up. They're like, well, we're the ones who buried Lysis. We were students of his. We'll go check it out. So they go and they're like, hey man, who are you? And he's like, I am a Lysis super fan. I'd followed his career forever. I've read his stuff. He's an inspiration to me. I wanted to come here to make sure he was buried properly and to offer sacrifice to his grave. And Epaminondas and his brother are like, cool. We loved Lysis too. We're the ones who buried him. And so they're like, oh, well, we have a lot in common. Hey, stranger, come live with us. So this guy just comes and lives with them. Yeah, anyway. What a coincidence. He goes there to offer sacrifice at this guy's grave, and the guys who dug the grave show up, and they're all become friends. Yeah. So Philodas the Molomarch, he was working. He was doing work here, arranging things. He'd make sure there's lots to drink, bringing lots of women in to distract the Polemarchs, especially Archias and Philip. Archias and Philip were all about it. They're like, yeah, bring me the women, bring me the highborn women. I want to get everybody. This is the festival of Aphrodite. I'm going at it. Anyway, Leontides, to his credit, he wasn't like that. He's like, I don't party like that. I'm a serious man. I'm not like that. So he didn't do it. He didn't go to the party. He maybe had a few drinks and then went home. He back at his own house. Just like, oh, well, that's a problem. We can't kill everybody in one spot, right? They're trying to sneak into this party and kill people. But Leontides, the most important guy, he's not even going to be there. And then they realized another guy, Hypates, who also wasn't going to be there. Like, well, damn, we got all these targets. What are we going to do? Well, they're going to have to split up into groups. Luckily for them, Hypates lived somewhat near Leontides, living in the rich part of town, probably. So then Chlydon shows up, the guy with the missing bridle. He tells them his story, and they're like, whoa, we almost called the whole thing off because of that. So they changed their view. They still thought the bridle was an omen, but they thought it was a good omen. Because if it wasn't for that bridle being moved, they would have called the whole thing off. So whichever god moved that bridle, which is how they interpreted it, was on their side because it caused good things to happen. So Pelopidas and Melone each lead a group. Pelopidas leads a group to go after Leontides. It might have been personal. Remember, Pelopidas was probably targeted by Leontides' assassins. Melone and his crew dress up like women. So I'm guessing these were the smaller stature guys. You probably don't have some big, huge hulking guy trying to pretend to be a woman. They're wearing hoods and garlands and stuff, and they're the assistants. They're the maids. They're not the main women. They're the ones that are helping the sex workers or the highborn women, with their clothes, and they're just attendants. So they're not as noticeable. Before this happens, before they're ready to leave, there's a bolt of lightning, but no thunder. And they thought this was good. It's like, hey, we're the thunder. The thunder is held back. We're getting ready to strike. That's the thunder. Unfortunately, a spy at one of the gates reported back to Archias. He said, look, I saw some exiles coming in. I saw them. A couple of them came in through the gate. Some of them are here. Something's going on. So that guy goes to Archias and tells him, and Archias is like, bring me Charon. Uh-oh. So some soldiers go to Charon's house where everyone is meeting. And there's a banging at the door, and they're like, uh-oh, the jig is up. We're screwed. Someone looks out the window, and it's only 4 guys. They're like, well, if they're coming to bust up our conspiracy, why is there only 4 guys? All right. So they all hide. Picture Life of Brian. There's one guy sticking out of a basket. One guy, he's completely visible, but he's got, his face is covered. If you can't see me, I can't see you, that kind of thing, right? So they're like, come with us. So Charon enters the door, and they're like, come with us. Archias wants to see you. And he's like, all right, okay, well, that's better than you guys busting up our conspiracy. I'll go, but give me a sec. I was in the middle of something. Hang on. Let me go back inside. Let me talk to my wife, tell her where I'm going. They're like, all right, hurry up, though. So he closes the door, goes back inside, he tells them what's up. And they're like, all right, well, you got to go, right? Otherwise, they'll get suspicious. And he's like, yeah, I got to go. This is dangerous, but I'll go. And then he's like, look, I don't want you guys to think I'm going to turn on you. I don't want you to think that I might give the whole thing up out of fear for myself. So here's my 15-year-old son. He's a hostage. Take him. If you want proof of my loyalty, kill him if I am not loyal. Pelopidas says, no, we aren't doing that. We trust you. Go ahead. Your son is not collateral. Do what needs to be done. We believe you. So he goes to the Polemarcheon, and Archias is already drunk and oiled up, literally oiled up. So Charon's like, what's going to happen? And Philodas the mole is standing right behind Archias. He's right there. So he's like, all right, what's going on? And Archias is like, hey, he's drunk, right? Remember that? He's like, I heard there were exiles in town. So he's not very subtle about it. He could have tried to figure out what Charon knew, tried to get him to admit something, but he just blurts this out. And Charon makes the best move possible. He plays the indignant patriot. He's like, where are the exiles? Where are they? Show me where they are. Let me at them. Brilliant, right? An old trick, but maybe not an old trick in 379 BC, right? So, and Philetus sitting right there, Philetus sitting right behind Archias is like, yes, you do that, Charon. You better do that or else. You find those exiles and you tell us when you find them. Go. Oh, brilliant, right? So Archias is satisfied with that. But as Charon was leaving, the message from Athens arrived. The one sent by the priest. The message that said exactly what was happening. But Archias was done. He's like, I don't want to do any more business. The message says, urgent business. And he goes, urgent business tomorrow. Shoves the letter under a pillow and goes back to partying. To this day, or at least something like it, certainly for many centuries afterwards, urgent tomorrow, urgent business tomorrow, urgent later, something to that effect became a saying. It was just repeated for many years, if not still being repeated. It became like a meme, an ancient world meme. So Charon went back to the house and was like, he didn't want to tell everybody what really happened because he didn't want to tell them that the Polemarchs knew about the exile, even though they were blundering. He didn't want to scare them. So he's like, he told them, he made up a story. He's like, he just asked me about this. And he pulled Pelopidas aside and was like, yo, what really happened is this. They know what's going on. They don't actually know, but they suspect. But right now they're still busy partying. So what should we do? Should we tell them or not? And Pelopidas is like, yeah, maybe we'll just keep that a secret. Well, they're all willing to die trying anyway. These men are all willing to die. We don't need to lower their morale if they're already willing. So he's just like, well, let's keep that to ourselves. Worse, though, the one guy that told the bridal guy to cancel the plot, he didn't show up. So they were also worried that either he had given them up or was about to or had told somebody. Anyway. So Melon and his group go out. They bring, like I said, the shorter probably guys, the less burly because they're hiding in women's clothing. Underneath their garb, they have the hemothorax, and they've got hidden daggers, and they're wearing all sorts of accoutrements that would be fitting for the festival of Aphrodite. So they go into the room. They're brought in behind the women, and Archias and Philip, the two Polemarchs, are clapping. They're like, yeah, the women are here. All right, we're ready. We're excited. And the maids are right there behind. There's a certain high priest, a guy named Chabrias, and he's at the party. He's partying too. He's drunk, and he's holding on to this relic, the Spear of Thebes. I tried real hard to find out what this spear had anything to do with, but I don't know what it was. So Chabrias notices something's a little weird. He's drunk, but he's like, he looks over at the maids and he says, isn't this melon? Now, he wasn't referring to the buffet. He wasn't like, isn't this melon? Like, isn't this cantaloupe? No, he's like, isn't that guy in women's clothing? Isn't that Melon, the Theban, the guy, the Democrat? The answer was yes. Melon's like, all right, jig is up. Pulls his dagger, charges right at Archias. A couple of the guys throw their goblets down and look for weapons, but Archias is just like dumbfounded. He's like, what's going on? He's really wasted. And our Melon drops him with one stab. And then Philip is like, he stands up, and he's also drunk. He falls over. They kill him, no problem. So Philetus, the Molomarch, stood forth. He emerged, and he's like, announces as this is happening, he's like, look, those of you sitting here, sitting by, if you're not involved, stay that way. We're not here for you. If you don't mess with us, we're going to leave you alone. We're here for these guys, and that's it. We're here for the Spartans. We're here for the traitors. That's it. So most of the people are just like, all right, I'll sip my wine, have a few olives, let the party continue, see who wins. We'll stay out of it. Another guy tries to grab that spear from Chabrias, and they have like a pulling match on the spear. And the guy's like, join us. Come on, man, join us. This is the Theban revolution. You're Theban. What are you siding with these guys for? But the guy's like, he's too slow. He's too drunk. He doesn't know what's happening. And someone just comes up behind him and stabs him. And that's that. The other guy grabs the spear and uses it to probably pierce another Theban or two. Very Red Wedding-ish, right? You got these guys sneaking in. They're wearing armor under their clothes. You know, it's a party. You're waiting for everyone to get drunk. Not everyone is killed. Some people are left out of it because you're not trying to piss off everybody. You're not trying to make enemies of everybody. You've got a very specific targets you want. Just like, you know, Roos and Walder took certain people captive to keep certain families from getting any ideas. Very similar. So it's a similar categorization as the Red Wedding. Now, but this isn't over, right? You can't think just because they killed these guys that there's still a garrison, you know, and there's still Sparta's not far away. So Athens hears about this. There's news going up. So a group of Athenians form an army. This is not a state-sponsored thing. They just do this of their own accord, partly because they owed Thebes a favor. I believe I mentioned this last time, but not that long before, during the Peloponnesian War, Lysander established a tyranny within Athens after conquering it. He installed the 30 tyrants. The Athenian Democrats, many of them fled to Thebes, had refuge for a while until they were able to expel the 30 tyrants. Now we have the reverse of that, right? Theban exiles flee to Athens. So the Athenians are like, we got to help pay them back. This is like divine. Like, this is all a circular thing. It's like, and so but they're like Tywin or maybe Walder Frey. They're late. They show up, but they don't actually engage. They're kind of like, well, let's wait to see what happens first. Maybe let's not commit just yet. I want to see Thebes start to win a little bit before we take their side. Otherwise, we're jumping on a losing cause. Because if Sparta just wins, if Sparta just puts this fire out and stomps out this rebellion, we don't want to have had anything to do with it. So, meanwhile, the other group of conspirators, Pelopidas and his group, they arrive at Leontides' house. They know they don't have a lot of time because they don't have watches or cell phones to coordinate their actions. So what's happening at the party might have already happened, and then word's going to spread, so they don't have a lot of time. Any moment, word could start to spread. It could be an outbreak of people hitting the streets. Who knows? They knock on the door saying, hey, we've got a message from Athens, which is kind of ironic given the message from Athens that should have been delivered to Archias that he didn't look at. A slave opens the doors like, all right, who are you? And they kick the door in. Like, as soon as he cracks the door, they kick it in and run through and disperse. They don't exactly know where in the house Leontides is. He's a rich guy, so he's got several rooms. Leontides hears this. He starts yelling. He's like, slaves, defend me, and it's kind of a similar deal where the Thebans are like, yo, don't get in our way. We're not going to touch you. You stay away from us. We won't mess with you. All we're here for is Leontides. We want your master, not you. So Leontides is in his own room. He pulls his sword and then he gets next to the door so that he's like hiding beside the door so that if someone comes in the door, they'll be in his blind spot. He can hit them. That's exactly what happens. Cephisidorus bursts through the door. Leontides stabs him in the side, killing him. The body falls at an awkward angle, kind of blocking the way, but Pelopidas manages to get past the body, but he's the only one. So he and Leontides go at it. Leontides is still shouting for slaves. They're not going to help, even if they were coming. At this point, Pelopidas' men are in the hallway. And Leontides is no slouch, like we said, a serious man. He wasn't drunk. He's a warrior. He's fighting Pelopidas. He gets in a shot to Pelopidas on the head. Doesn't stop him, though. The counter thrust right in the chest. Leontides drops dead. The leader of the oligarchs, mastermind of the takeover, which took 3 years. They held it for 3 years, was dead thanks to this commando raid and the skills of Pelopidas, Melon, and others. But now the resolve of them and people like Epaminondas and Charon is going to have to start to play out because, like, once again, killing the leaders doesn't get them their city back. It takes more than that. And they had to kill that Iphicrates guy as well. So they leave, they go after him. He hears them coming, jumps out a window, runs away, but he wasn't very fast. They got him. They catch him, killed him. Next part of the plan called for them to free the prisoners. A lot of Democrats were still in prison. A lot of people that Leontides didn't like, he was prosecuting, or rather persecuting, a little of one, a little from column A, a little from column B. The Molomarch Philodas went to the guard and was like, hey, Archaeus wants this guy let out. The guy that they were about to execute, the guy that they argued over that morning, he was going to be executed the next day, so he was a priority to get out of prison. But the guard's like, show me your orders. Like, I can't just let this guy out without, like, some sort of proof that Leontides gave this order, even though Archaeus is a pretty high-ranking guy. So Archaeus is like, sorry, not Archaeus. Philetus is like, all right, well, here's my permission. Here's my permission slip. It's a spear. He stabs the guard with a spear, and they let everybody out. It's like the weasel soup incident. Like, this internal takeover happens. They free all the prisoners, and a lot of the prisoners join the effort. They help the resistance. They help the revolution. Some of them leave the city in a group, though, because they are true exiles, or I don't know. It's kind of puzzling to me why some of them left and didn't help. Anyway, they are going to pop up again in a minute. In the meantime, everyone starts parading through the streets, yelling and shouting and saying the tyrants are dead. Leontides, Philip, Archaeus, Hypates, they're dead. We got them. They start distributing weapons. They don't have a lot because it was hard to smuggle weapons in. That's the thing that they could get caught doing. But there's also like ceremonial displays, like old swords, old spears, old shields. They start grabbing those. Gorgidas and Epaminondas raid the armory, start handing out even more weapons. The noise in the streets finally gets the Spartans' attention. They're in the garret, they're in the Cadmea, and they finally be like, wait, what's going on? I hear there's noise out there. And they climb up and they look down. The Cadmea is on a hill, just like the Red Keep. I called it the Red Keep of Thebes. This is a good example of that. So they look down on the city. It's nighttime, yet for some reason, there are lots of people with lights on in their houses. They can see torches in the streets. And they immediately know what's going on. They're like, uh-oh, this is some sort of violent action. They're probably coming for us, aren't they? Yes, they are. Lots of smoke, which somehow relates to that dream, right? Only the fort was wreathed in smoke. The rest of the city was wreathed in fire, which is what we're seeing, right? The wreaths in fire are people, though. It's not houses on fire. It's the revolutionaries. It's the rebellion. It's the taking back of Thebes. So whether this dream actually happened or not, I mean, I certainly lean towards no. It makes for a great story, right? And it certainly is how they told the story afterwards. But once again, the Spartans are like, well, we still have the fort locked down. You can't get us out of here. But they tightened the siege. They surrounded it. They're like, you guys are going to run out of food, you know. That group from Athens said, hey, we're going to help now too. They were like, all right, you guys have done well. We're going to help. We're ready to join on. So they do that. They help out. This turned out to be decisive because they needed more people to help with the siege. Sparta responded, though. Sparta finally got wind of this. And remember, it's not far away. They got an army together and they sent Cleombrotus. Now, this is interesting. They sent Cleombrotus, not Agesilaus. Now, I kind of wonder about that. Agesilaus is the one that maybe arranged for this in the first place. which might be why he didn't go. It might be why he was trying to keep his distance, because he didn't want to be incriminated in having done this in the first place. And also because he had shown how he's a little unreasonable when it comes to Thebes, how he is willing to lose his own men to a certain degree if it harms Thebes. Sparta didn't like that. I mean, even though he's one of the kings, they have limited ability to stop him. The E4s, the 5 E4s who can override the kings, they have a lot of power too. And my suspicion is that they're like, yeah, we need someone that's not just motivated by killing Thebes. We have a hegemony to maintain here. That's what we're after. We're looking for control, not revenge. But it may also just be that he was trying to work the political situation, or maybe he still had that injury bothering him. There's a lot of possibilities. Either way, Sparta's authoritarian system, their lack of imagination in their lower ranks caused a real problem here. Remember, Lysinodorus was over there trying to seal the tomb of Alcmene. So the two second in commands, Euripides and Artaxerxes, they're like, all right, well, the Spartan thing to do is to not give up. So that's easy enough. Let's just not give up. The problem was that not everyone in the garrison was Spartan, not even close. Like, Sparta doesn't have enough people for that, to put garrisons all over Greece. So they had Spartan leaders, some Spartan troops, like a corps, but then you have like allies and even a few Theban oligarch fanboys. So on the inside, they were a little worried that maybe there would be some turn here. So they asked, all right, normally we would just fight to the death. We would not give this up for any reason, but we're a little concerned. So let's negotiate. How about this, y'all? You let us go. No harm done. You can have your Cadmea back. And Thebes is like, deal. Absolutely. You get the hell out. We won't kill you. You can leave, but give us back our fort. That's what happens. They both agree. No funny business. The Spartans start marching home. The Thebans start celebrating. On the way home, the Spartan army encounters the other Spartan army, the one that was sent to help them. And they're like, oh, I guess we should have waited one more day. That's all it was. One more day and the Spartan relief force would have gotten there under Cleombrotus. Whoops. That's how close it was. So that's bad, because the two garrison commanders are like, uh-oh, this is really bad. We look like wieners. We look like losers. We look like cowards. We screwed up. No one's going to see this in a good light. So they run away. They flee. They go to Corinth, where they failed to escape. Agesilaus had them arrested, or they were arrested, brought back to Sparta. Do y'all remember this is Sparta, where they kicked the guy into the chasm? I think I told you in episode 1 that chasm is real. That's where these two guys ended up. Euripides and Artaxerxes were tossed into the chasm. That chasm had been in use as an execution method for so long, they probably landed on bones and not the ground. Yikes, right? But this wasn't enough. Lysinodorus, even though it was Agesilaus' orders to open that tomb, and Lysinodorus was back at the tomb resealing it using pious methods told to him by a priest, he didn't know any of this had even happened. He was in Haliartus doing all this. He didn't know Thebes had come with a relief force. He didn't know the garrison had been defeated or gave up. So he was fined an amount that he couldn't pay, so he had to go into exile. And then they killed his mother. They just killed his mother because she gave birth to a guy who turned out to be a failure, even though they made him a captain and all that. Really weak, really scapegoating him, basically. The vindictiveness, though, served a purpose. This irrational punishment of Lysinodorus did have a rational undertone or strategy behind it, which is that everyone else in Greece got scared. They're like, uh-oh, Sparta's mad. What are they going to do? You know, we're scared. Athens got so scared that the two guys that led that private force that went to help Thebes, they executed them. When Cleombrotus' army marched nearby, they're like, hey, Cleombrotus, oh, hold on. Look, these guys led that army. We killed them. Look, they're dead. See? And they had Chabrias go out with a much smaller army to block a mountain pass into Attica, which is the area where Athens exists. So Cleombrotus probably wasn't going to go after Athens anyway, but they were making sure. So he blocked that mountain pass, and that sent a loud and clear message that Athens was not with Thebes. Like, we're not with Thebes after all. Maybe we help, but hey, it's just a temporary thing, and it wasn't an official capacity. Leave us alone, please. We're not doing it. So Cleombrotus, he passes them by. He's like, yeah, well, we're Thebes is the problem here anyway. So the Greek Game of Thrones would surely shift again here, because you got Athens, Sparta, Thebes. None of them are allied with each other. They're all separate, kind of. Athens is kind of like neutral, just worried about Sparta's wrath. Whereas Thebes is all about it. They're like, we're fighting for our lives. We're trying to change the order of things. We took our city back, but we know Sparta's not just going to give up, right? They got a new king in the field, and Athens is just back down on helping them again. So, still, here's what Plutarch said. The effect on Thebes and the rest of the Greek world was significant. Quote.
I'm so sorry. The subsequent change in the political situation made this exploit the more glorious. For the war which broke down the pretensions of Sparta and put an end to her supremacy by land and sea began from that night, in which people, not by surprising any fort or castle or citadel, but by coming into a private house with 11 others, loosed and broke in pieces, if the truth may be expressed in a metaphor, the fetters of the Lacedaemonian supremacy, which were thought indissoluble and not to be broken.
So Sparta took the city by surprise, but they didn't trumpet that too much because it broke the king's peace. Nevertheless, it was a big statement of power, and it was a statement of, hey, we can get away with this. Rules for you, not for us. And Pelopidas and team did more than match the plotting of Leontides. They undid all that and then some. Phoibedas and possibly Agesilaus all undone by this. All that statement of Spartan power was flipped and made light of. Like, you guys did all this and you lost it to even less. So Agesilaus, of all people, he's the one we are sure is the most unhappy about all this. I mean, he hates Thebes, and he was almost certainly a big part of that vindictive justice, I put in air quotes. So he's coming. He's not done. Meanwhile, the liberators were celebrated for their incredible achievement. There was a little bit of celebration before they got back to work because they knew they had a lot of work to do. Here's another line. The night when Pelopidas, with no fort, no walls, no citadel, but merely by bringing 12 men home, loosed and struck off the shackles of Laconian power, which had seemed impossible to loosen or break. Yeah. So they just had to keep going. The king's peace was broken again. Persia would have its say too. No matter what the wrath of Persia or Sparta would be, Thebes was gonna try to weather the storm, see if they could do it. They have a new generation of youngsters who grew up under this Spartan occupation, had plenty of time to be mad about that, be caged animals. Finally, when they were unleashed, they had great success. It looked like the gods were on their side, right? Look at all the coincidences and strange little twists that had to happen to make it work. If that letter got through, if Archias had been a little less drunk, if one of the conspirators had turned on them like they feared they would, if the bridle had been there, there's all these little things that could have screwed the whole thing up, could have ended it. In an era like this, you got to think the gods are on your side when things go that well, when the luck is all on your side like that. So they were feeling really optimistic, really positive, really good about it. But the first thing they had to do was make sure not to repeat the mistakes of the past, right? Let's talk about the Sacred Band for the last part of our episode today. The Sacred Band was formed by Gorgidas and a man named Pamenes, with heavy influence probably from Plato, the philosopher of all people, stationed in the Cadmea. So the idea was, all right, well, we had this problem where our garrison wasn't even there because of this religious festival. So let's not do that again. But let's also have a competent, strong city army that is ready at all times rather than calling men up when something happens, because that's too slow. We need to be able to react to things when they happen. We can't be like, okay, we're under attack. Get the army together. Call everybody in from the countryside. No, that's too slow. So here's possibly a quote from Gorgidas. It's definitely a quote. It just might not be from Gorgidas, but here it is. It's great. Quote.
Homer's Nestor was no tactician when he urged the Greeks to form in companies by clans and tribes.
That clan might give assistance unto clan, and tribes unto tribes.
Since he should have stationed lover by beloved. For tribesmen and clansmen make little account of tribesmen and clansmen in times of danger, whereas a band that is held together by the friendship between lovers is indissoluble and not to be broken, since the lovers are ashamed to play the coward before their beloved, and the beloved before their lovers, and both stand firm in danger to protect each other.
Yeah, 150 pairs of lovers stationed side by side. Well, eventually stationed side by side. As we'll see in the beginning, they went through a little bit of a growth phase where they figured out how best to use this group. But it's very Theban in origin. Heracles, who was one of the patrons of Thebes, he had a lover named Aeolus. That was a man, yes. And the tomb of Aeolus is near Thebes. And it was very common, like a kissing rock, or like the Overlook, like the high school place where all the kids would go to hang out on Friday night. This was like the tomb of Aeolus for young lovers, male lovers. They would go there and swear vows. They would pledge their troth, or whatever you want to call it, pledge to be loyal to each other as lovers. And, so they put a holy oath to it, put something official to it, right? And as I said before, this is getting us back to the whole Thebes of it, whereas you got this concept of love being important, and no other city in Greece had the relationship with Eros that Thebes did. Remember what I said about each city-state has a different relationship with each Greek deity. And I also said it's a marriage of Aphrodite and Ares. The beauty and desire and lust with war. Right? That's what we have mingled here. You got Thebans who are becoming militaristic. They want to take their city back. They want to push back against Spartans, which is going to take military power, military aggression. But they want to have that on a basis, on an anchor, on a bedrock of love, not of ideology to a state in terms of authority or in terms of some other ideal, but in terms of love, in terms of that bond. That's the most important thing that they're swearing on here, that they're emphasizing as a military ideal. Agesilaus hated that. Again, the Spartans male Spartans had male lovers all the time, including Agesilaus. But they were sometimes shy about it. It was like a don't ask, don't tell thing. There's an anecdote when Agesilaus was in Persia, and he had taken a liking to this young Persian boy, which again, boy in this context doesn't necessarily mean underage. It might, but it's better to think of the term boy in this context as like when a British person says lad. But again, it might have been a boy. So this guy comes to greet Agesilaus, and it's normal for them to like do a little kiss thing, like the Italian greeting or whatever. But Agesilaus is like he rears back. Like he doesn't want the guy to kiss him because he's ashamed. He doesn't want anyone to know that he likes this kid. And the kid's like, wait, what? And why don't you want me to? It's embarrassing. It's awkward because this is like a moment in front of a bunch of people at court. And later, Agesilaus is like, hey, why? What happened there? And his friends are like, what do you mean what happened there? You reared back. You shamed him. And he's like, well, I didn't mean to. I was like, well, go approach him and tell him do it right. So, yeah, Agesilaus goes and plays it off. He's like, hey, man, why didn't you kiss me properly? And so he does so instead. So, yeah, that's a little different. So the marriage of Aphrodite and Ares in Greek mythology, they had 7 children. Eros was one of them. Phobos, Deimos, Harmonia, Pothos, Anteros, and Himeros. Eros is love and desire. Phobos is fear. Deimos is terror. You might be like, wait, fear and terror are separate? Well, Phobos and Deimos were twins. So yeah, it's about right. Harmonia, that's harmony and concord. Pothos is yearning. And Teros is requited love, not unrequited love, but balance in relationships. So Pothos is kind of the opposite. Pothos is unrequited love, yearning, and Teros is requited love, but also balance. Like I said, balance within relationships. So it's not like one person really loves the other person a lot more than the other. That is something that Teros is supposed to be associated with. And Himeros, lust, well, that's simple enough. Now, Harmonia married Cadmus, the mythical founder of Thebes, the one who killed the dragon and then sowed the teeth in the ground. So the marriage of Harmonia and Cadmus is a balance between love and strife. That's what it's considered. And Harmonia had this necklace that went through all these iterations of cursing people in Thebes, and finally Thebes broke the curse by giving the necklace to the temple at Olympus so that it couldn't be so that its mischief, its curse would be handled. That necklace is going to come back much later in our story. Certainly not today, certainly not the next episode, but we'll get back to it. Don't forget the necklace of Harmonia. Now, it's also important to understand how they didn't just emphasize love. The connection to love and Eros, as in a deity of sorts, is important here. That's why it's called the sacred band. Plato says a lover is a divine friend inspired of God. It's the best type of human connection there is. The Greeks revered it. And there was like, there is no better thing than the love of someone who's your equal. And of course, this was in this society, it was all men. They didn't think women could be equals, but whatever. And they also didn't have a word for gay. There's no word for male. It's just all love, right? They definitely had views on it that differed, but they didn't distinguish it so much that they even had words to differentiate it. This is where Plato comes into it a bit. Like I said, he was potentially a direct influence on the formation of this band, at least an indirect one, because if you read some of his works, like in the Republic, he even mentions this possibility of lovers fighting together in war. And he wrote about it before the Sacred Band was formed. So that's a very strong argument that he had something to do with this. And he lived nearby in Athens. It was like the guy lived in this era close by. He had already founded his academy at this point. I believe I mentioned that last episode. There's another quote from Pamenes, the other important figure. He was a leader who's going to come up again, another Theban leader who had a lot to do with this. He said, "A squad held together by Eros cannot be dispersed or fragmented, since lovers and their beloved feel shame if they disappoint one another. They stand firm against all dangers on one another's behalf." I think there's a lot of truth to that. I'm no military expert, but that statement in a vacuum, that's pretty true. When you're talking about people who actually love each other, now, I'm not talking about people who say they do. I'm not talking about a marriage that's been dead for a while, that people are going through the motions. I'm not talking about, obsession or just lust that's interpreted as love. I'm talking about genuine, sincere love. And when you do love somebody that much, yeah, you'll do anything for them. You won't shame them. You won't back down. You won't run away when they're standing there. You'll do everything. It's a pretty interesting concept for the basis of a military ethos, right? And it's very unique in the entire history of the world. So this is fascinating. But the idea wasn't just all this group and who they would be and their unusual formation and value system. It was also, from a logistical standpoint, it's like, these guys are going to stay at the Cadmea. Whenever they're not at war, they're stationed in the fort. So we can't lose the fort so easily next time. We'll have our best guys, and they would also be state sponsored. That's the other thing, is these guys are training all the time. They're like knights, or they're like the Jason's mercenaries. They're training constantly. There's no going to handle their fields. Other people are doing that for them. They're working on training. They're athletics, spear work, discipline, whatever you need, whatever they need to do. And this enables them to be on display at all times in the city. They can go out and do their exercises in public and inspire the youth to join. They can go out and parades, like we have military parades today. Sometimes they're kind of silly, but sometimes they're inspiring. And, you know, when the army is doing a good job, they're very inspiring. And the army had just done a great job here. They just threw out Sparta. And this is the extent of that. This is the extension of that, rather. They're trying to build on that win. This is the unit that forms from that win, that victory. That's their kind of the thing that put the wind in their sails here. And it's kind of weird, the logistics of this group. I've never seen any of this. I'm sure there's just endless academic texts that I'm not aware of because, I mean, people have been writing about this forever. The Sacred Band has been very popular in male gay culture for a long time for reasons that are kind of obvious. There's lots of literature on it. They've been inspired male groups from centuries past up till now. A little more on that later, but they're still to this day held in high esteem in certain circles, even though it's been 2,400 years. So, but I have questions. Like, for example, okay, so you got paired lovers in the group, and as I said later, pretty soon after this, they're going to be stationed next to each other. At first, they were kind of spread out, but now they're next to each other. So what does that mean in terms of like logistics? What happens if your lover is injured? Are you just not in the army that day? Do you both sit out for a while? So that seems like kind of a flaw. Like one guy gets hurt and it actually takes two guys out, even if it's only temporary. And what if that guy is killed? What if one of them is killed? Are you just out? You don't have a lover anymore, so you can't be in the Sacred Band? Maybe you find a new lover and then you're back in. It's kind of hard to understand, but that might be how they always have 300. There's probably like maybe 100 guys in reserve that are currently partnerless, or their partner is recovering, something like that. Because otherwise, it's kind of like, well, how do they manage that, right? Like one guy's got a bad ankle, and like both of them have to sit out. So some of this is probably not quite as strict as it sounds. It probably had some exceptions where single guys are in there, you know, like their lover is back at home injured, but they didn't want both guys to sit out. For example, like Pelopidas, we're going to have a few cases of Pelopidas fighting within the Sacred Band. He's like always there. You know, what is this? Does he just have a lover that also never died? It was always there, never got hurt. You know, was it hanging out by him at all times? You know, it was like, or did he take new lovers every once in a while? Or was it, you know, maybe these guys did a little poly thing where they have a couple of lovers. That way, there's always one of them that's going to be available to stand next to them in the phalanx. Yeah, it's kind of like, I wonder how they handled some of these things. It's not written about at all. This is pure guesswork on my part. I don't have any firm answers here. I'm just very curious. So, with Athens wavering, Thebes offered Sparta a deal. They're like, all right, we'll rejoin your league. We'll have peace. Thebes and Sparta will not have any more war, but you have to recognize our democratic government. You don't rule us anymore. We're a democracy. You guys can still be top dog in Greece, you know, under the Persian king's peace. We'll live with that, but we're a democracy again, and that's our terms. Now, Spartan King Cleombrotus was like I said, he's a bit of an Edmure Tully. He's not an Agesilaus. He's not a Tywin. He's not nearly as aggressive. He's like, all right, I'm of a mind to let these negotiations play out. Let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes. In the meantime, Cleombrotus had accidentally encountered some of those prisoners that escaped, that were let out by Philaetus, and killed them all. So bad luck to them. They got out of prison, they were freed, and then ran into a Spartan army by accident. Anyway, so Cleombrotus is very keen on letting this play out. He doesn't want necessarily to have war between Sparta and Thebes either. And this reveals the division within Sparta. Agesilaus is obviously on the aggressive side, but lots of Spartans are even more conservative than he is. So in the terms of Sparta, Agesilaus is a progressive. It sounds weird to say that, but in Spartan terms, it's true, because a true Spartan conservative would not be conquering outside of Sparta. They would not be extending their influence like that. They would be keeping it tight within their own culture and not being influenced by all these others. Because you see what happens. They get influenced by huge amounts of money, a la Lysander. We saw that last time. It throws off the basis for their culture. These sort of influences come in and mess them up. And it did. So while Agesilaus is pushing for all this, you have people, which Cleombrotus may be one of them, some of the ephors, some of the other power people in Sparta whose names we don't have. They are of a mind to accept this deal and say any sort of peace is good because we don't want to be the police of Greece. And so he's letting messages go back and forth. Cleombrotus is sitting there with his army, sending messages back and forth. Now in Westeros, as we know, this would take a huge amount of time, even with ravens, right? But remember how close everything is here. Like, it's just like a couple of days going back and forth between Thebes, Sparta, Athens. So this happened fairly quickly. Now, so Cleombrotus was like, yeah, let's see. We'll accept that. I'm okay to accept that. Let me see if the rest of Sparta will. No. Agesilaus' camp is too rooted in their ways. He is not going to accept this. He's like, nope. He makes very unrealistic demands. There's no way this is going to happen, which is he knows this. He's making the negotiations fail to bring things back to war. He says, the only thing I'll accept is punishment of the coup leaders and reinstatement of the oligarchy, which is obviously a non-starter. They're not going to do that. So this is the, I'm not going to negotiate 101 via negotiating in a way that means the negotiations will end. So Cleombrotus marched back home after about 2 weeks. Negotiations failed, but nothing else happened yet. Thebes and Athens were still, waiting. They wanted to see what would happen next. They wanted to see what Agesilaus would do. And they wanted to rebuild their own strength. They had things to do at home. So any delay here is good for us. And it's winter. Agesilaus might have been ready to attack, but he wasn't going to attack in winter. Cleombrotus wasn't either, and if Agesilaus isn't going to do it, then Cleombrotus certainly isn't. So winter, they got to at least wait that out. By spring, however, we're back to it. Okay, folks. We didn't get as far as I wanted to in this episode, but that's all good. Fun is fun. Story is story. We're not trying to rush through this. I hope enough of you all are enjoying this that it's gonna be worthwhile for us to keep doing it because I'm very inclined to keep this story going. Speak up if you are for or against that, but even if you're against it, y'all, we're still gonna have lots of other episodes. So we got plenty of other content if you're not into it, and if you are, definitely speak up. A lot of y'all already have. It's very encouraging to me. I'm very into this topic and the related ones, as you can probably tell from my enthusiasm level. So I'd love to keep going. I intend on keep going. Like I said, we got quite a bit left. These characters are super interesting to me. So we'll reconvene at a future date with the next episode here, and we'll have a few more Westeros episodes to close out the year. I think the next one of these is scheduled for December, but regardless, you can check with us or check on our social media. We always have our schedule here and there. And let's see, a couple closing thoughts. I got to scroll down to the bottom of this document because I didn't get there in the natural course of things here. We talked about Pelopidas and Epaminondas, Jason of Pherae, Cleombrotus, Datames. We saw the deaths of Leontides, Archias, and Philip, and within the garrison there, within the Spartan or the Theban oligarchs. We still have a lot of characters going. We got Artaxerxes, we got Agesilaus, we got Chabrias, the Jaime Lannister character. We got Iphicrates and Tirabazus, who barely appeared in this episode, but there's still a lot of them left. We got Tirabazus and Darius, and Parysatis, our Cersei. She's not done yet either. What's Tirabazus going to do about having a Persian princess offered to him, and then the king takes her back and marries her himself? That can't be good, right? So, yeah, we got a lot more coming. I'm excited to tell you about it. Until then, you know what to do. But first, actually, let me say some goodbyes. We have Carl Karsnark says, I love this stuff. The more geeky, Greeky stuff, the better, I say. Dornish Dame says, loving these eps. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate that. I got to give y'all the trivia answer. Who formed the Sacred Band? Were you paying close enough attention to the guy who started it all? I said Plato and Parmenides were involved, but the man given top credit, not Pelopidas, not Epaminondas, not Melone, Gorgidas. Yes, the cavalry commander who stood firm when Sparta tried to get him to reveal the tomb of Dirce, which only Theban cavalry commanders are given the location of. On behalf of Ashea, thanks y'all. Our music was brought to you by Joey Townsend. Our video intro by Michael Klarfeld. And if you want to check Michael Klarfeld out, go to klaradox.de. That's claradox.de. You can buy his maps for yourself. There's lots of them. They're so cool. And while you're at it, encourage Michael to make more, because he's got some other ones on the way, but they're kind of, he's on a hiatus from working on them. Every once in a while, he's an artist. You get the fire within you to work on something. Well, he's got fire for other projects right now. But if we could maybe one day get him back to making these maps, they're one of the best fan-made things that exists in the entire Song of Ice and Fire fandom. So, yeah, let Michael know how much you appreciate his maps. And on behalf of Ashea, I'm Aziz. We'll see you next time. Valar Rereadus.